7 years of work means nothing. Lachlan Barrett sneered at me across the polished oak table. His voice carried through the open-plan office where 40 of my colleagues sat frozen at their desks. He was 32 and looked like someone assembled him from a catalog of MBA graduates. Dark suit that fit too well, hair gelled into aggressive spikes, teeth so white they could blind you in direct sunlight. His title was Vice President of Operations, which meant he'd been here exactly 6 weeks and thought he understood everything. I sat there with my hands folded. My laptop was closed in front of me. I didn't blink. I didn't cry. After 7 years of holding this company's infrastructure together with code and patience, you learn that panic is just wasted energy. What he didn't know was that I wasn't just any employee. I was the architect, the one who built every system they relied on. And in exactly 3 weeks, they'd be begging me to come back. I'm Mara Finch. My official title is Senior Systems Integration Specialist. Sounds impressive, right? It's a fancy way of saying I'm the person who makes sure all the different software platforms in this company can actually talk to each other without setting themselves on fire. I'm the digital plumber for a $50 million operation. My job is to keep the data flowing between sales, logistics, client management, and international operations. For 7 years, I've been the invisible hand that keeps Brightline Technologies running. The office smells like coffee grounds and the faint electrical hum of server rooms, while everyone else is in glass-walled meeting rooms, talking about quarterly projections and market penetration. I'm 3 floors down, making sure those projections actually have data to stand on. I'm the reason the sales team can pull up client histories in under 2 seconds. I'm the reason logistics knows exactly where every shipment is at any given moment. I'm the only person who understands how our legacy mainframe talks to our modern cloud infrastructure. The system I built is a beautiful mess. It's held together by custom APIs, middleware I wrote myself, and about 15,000 lines of integration code that only exists in my head in a private repository. When I started here, Brightline was using 5 different software platforms that couldn't communicate. Sales used one system, logistics another. Accounting had their own ancient software from the 90s. Clients were getting invoices with the wrong information because nothing synced properly. I spent 3 years building the bridges, writing the translation layers, creating automated workflows that moved data between systems without anyone having to touch it. It worked so well that people forgot it was even there. That's the problem with being really good at your job. When everything runs smoothly, people assume it's always been that way. They forget there's a person behind the curtain making sure the gears don't grind to a halt. I completed 103 projects during my time here. Every single one delivered on time. Every single one still running perfectly. But here's what made me truly irreplaceable. The integration core, what I privately called the Nexus, wasn't documented anywhere except in my personal notes. Company policy said everything should be in the shared repository. I'd been meaning to do that. For 7 years, I'd been meaning to do that. But there was always another urgent project, another fire to put out, another deadline that couldn't wait. And maybe, deep down, I knew that being the only one who understood the system gave me job security. I was wrong about the security part. Then came Lachlan Barrett. He wasn't hired. He was installed. Brightline's CEO, Marcus Radley, brought him in from some consulting firm in New York. Barrett had credentials that looked impressive on paper. MBA from Wharton, 5 years at McKinsey, a LinkedIn profile that read like a corporate fantasy novel. His first week, he called an all-hands meeting to introduce himself. He stood at the front of the room in his $1,000 suit and told us about his vision for operational excellence. He used words like synergy and optimization and vertical integration. He talked about eliminating redundancies and maximizing efficiency. I watched from the back row as people nodded along like he was saying something profound. What he was actually saying was that he planned to cut costs by firing people. His second week, he fired the head of logistics. Linda had been with the company for 12 years. She knew every shipping route, every customs regulation, every backup carrier we had relationships with. Barrett called her into his office and let her go with 2 weeks severance. He said her position was redundant, that modern software could handle routing automatically. He was technically correct. The software could handle it, because I'd built that automation 3 years ago with Linda's input. But he didn't know that. He thought the software just magically worked on its own. His third week, he started looking at the rest of us. He scheduled meetings with every department head, asking them to justify their team's existence. People started getting nervous. Coffee break conversations turned into whispered speculation about who would be next. Barrett seemed to enjoy it. The power of making people afraid. I knew I was on his list because my title confused him. During his fourth week, he sent me an email asking for a meeting to discuss my role. I showed up at his office at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. He kept me waiting for 20 minutes while he finished a call with someone in New York. When he finally let me in, he didn't offer me a seat. "Walk me through what you do here," he said. Not looking up from his laptop, I explained the integration systems, the APIs, the data pipelines, the middleware that connected everything. His eyes glazed over after about 30 seconds. "So you maintain the IT infrastructure," he said. "Not exactly," I replied. "I build and maintain the systems that allow our different platforms to communicate and share data seamlessly." "Right, AT stuff," he said, finally looking at me. "We're moving to a unified cloud platform next quarter. Enterprise solution. Everything in one place. No need for all these complicated connections you're talking about." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Which platform?" I asked. "Salesforce Enterprise with full integration modules," he said, like he was reading from a brochure. "The vendor assured me it handles everything we need." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to explain that we'd evaluated that exact platform 4 years ago and rejected it because it couldn't handle our international operations or interface with our legacy systems. But I could see in his eyes that he'd already made up his mind. I was a redundancy, waiting to be eliminated. "Is there anything else?" I asked. "Not right now," he said, turning back to his laptop. "I'll be in touch." I walked out of his office, knowing my days were numbered. But I wasn't worried. Not yet. Because I knew something Barrett didn't. I knew exactly how fragile the systems were without me. The next 2 weeks were strange. Barrett started treating me like I was already gone. He'd walk past my desk without acknowledging me. In meetings, he'd talk over me or ignore my input entirely. Other employees noticed and started avoiding me. Like failure was contagious. Like being on Barrett's bad side might somehow spread to them. I kept doing my job, monitoring the systems, fixing bugs, keeping everything running smoothly. Nobody thanked me. Nobody even noticed. That's the thing about invisible work. It's only visible when it stops. On a Thursday morning in October, exactly 6 weeks after Barrett joined the company, I got a calendar invite for an emergency operations meeting at 2 p.m. No agenda, no explanation, just Barrett and CEO Marcus Radley listed as required attendees. I knew what it was. I showed up 5 minutes early. The conference room on the 22nd floor had glass walls that looked out over the rest of the office. Everyone could see inside. Barrett was already there, along with Radley and Karen from HR. The seating arrangement told me everything. Barrett sat at the head of the table, Radley to his right, Karen to his left, one empty chair facing all three of them, the execution chair. I sat down and waited. Barrett didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Mara, we're restructuring the technology division," he began. "As part of that restructuring, we're eliminating your position effective immediately." My heart rate didn't even spike. I'd been expecting this. "Can I ask why?" I said calmly. "Your contributions to the company have been minimal," Barrett said. He actually said that. 7 years of work, 103 projects. Minimal. "The systems you've been maintaining are being replaced by our new enterprise platform," he continued. "Your skill set is no longer aligned with our operational needs." And through the glass walls, I could see people at their desks, pretending not to watch. But they were watching. Everyone was watching. This was Barrett making an example, showing everyone that nobody was safe, that he had the power to eliminate anyone he wanted. Marcus Radley sat there and said nothing. The CEO who'd hired me 7 years ago, who'd praised my work in company meetings, who'd personally approved my last 3 salary increases. He sat there and let Barrett humiliate me in front of the entire office. "You'll receive 4 weeks of severance," Karen from HR said, sliding an envelope across the table. "Your access badge and company laptop need to be returned before you leave today." I looked at Barrett. His expression was smug, satisfied. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd eliminated a redundancy and saved the company money. What he'd actually done was set off a time bomb. "I understand," I said softly. My voice was level, no tremolo, no rage. I stood up slowly. My knees didn't shake. I pulled my access badge from around my neck and placed it gently on the table. I closed my laptop. The company issued one and slid it across to Karen. Then I looked directly at Barrett and said 6 words. "Good luck with the migration." His smile widened. He thought I was being sarcastic. He had no idea I was giving him a warning. I walked out of that conference room with my head high, past the desks where my colleagues sat frozen, not meeting my eyes, past the reception desk where Jenny had always greeted me with a smile. She wasn't smiling now. I took the elevator down 22 floors, walked through the lobby with its marble floors and minimalist furniture, pushed through the glass doors into the October afternoon, and that's when I let myself smile. Before I tell you how Barrett systematically destroyed his own career in the space of 3 weeks, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. You'll want to be here for what happens next, because trust me, this gets so much better. Now, back to Barrett, who at that exact moment was celebrating his victory with Marcus Radley. What they didn't know, what nobody in that building knew, was that I wasn't just the person who maintained the systems. I was the systems. Every piece of integration code that connected their platforms together had my fingerprints on it. Not literally, obviously, but the architecture, the logic, the solutions to problems that came up over 7 years. All of that lived in my head. Sure, there was code in the repository, but that code was the facade, the real work, the critical connections that made everything function. Those were in modules I'd built and maintained separately. I'd been planning to document everything properly, eventually, but there were always more urgent things to do, more fires to put out, more impossible deadlines to meet. And honestly, keeping that knowledge private made me valuable, made me necessary, or so I thought. Here's what Barrett didn't understand about systems integration. He thought the software platforms we used were like Lego blocks. You buy the pieces, snap them together, and everything works. But real enterprise systems are more like trying to get 5 people who speak different languages to have a conversation without a translator. The platforms don't naturally communicate. They have different data formats, different APIs, different ways of handling errors. Making them work together requires middleware, translation layers, custom code that sits between the systems and makes them understand each other. I'd built all of that. The integration core, I called the Nexus, handled about 15,000 transactions per day. It moved data between our CRM, our logistics platform, our accounting system, our international operations dashboard, and our client portal. It did this invisibly, automatically, flawlessly, because I'd spent 3 years building it and 4 years maintaining it. The code wasn't just functional, it was elegant. It anticipated problems before they happened. It had fallback systems, and error handling, and automatic recovery processes. It was my masterpiece, and it was all tied to my employee credentials, not because I was trying to hold the company hostage, but because that's how I'd set up the authentication 7 years ago, when I was the only one working on it. The system used my employee ID as the master admin account. I'd been meaning to change that, eventually. But here's the thing about critical infrastructure. You don't mess with it when it's working perfectly. You don't risk breaking something that handles 15,000 transactions a day just to update documentation. So my credentials stayed as the root access. My employee ID was woven into the system at the foundational level. And when Karen from HR deactivated my badge as I walked out of the building, she didn't just revoke my physical access. She deactivated my digital identity across all of Brightline's systems, including the Nexus. I knew this would happen. I'd been the one who set up the automated deactivation protocols 3 years ago. When an employee leaves, their access gets revoked everywhere within 15 minutes. It's a security measure. It's supposed to prevent former employees from accessing sensitive systems. It works exactly as designed. What Barrett didn't know, what nobody knew, was that revoking my access didn't just lock me out. It locked everything out, because I was the root admin. When my credentials got deactivated, the Nexus interpreted it as a critical security breach, like someone had stolen the master key. And when that happens, the Nexus has protocols I built. It goes into lockdown mode. It stops processing transactions. It waits for the root admin to verify that everything is okay before resuming operations. That's a feature, not a bug. It's supposed to protect the company's data during a security incident. But in this case, the security incident was me getting fired. And the root admin, who needed to verify everything, was me, who no longer had access. See the problem. I was home by 3:15 p.m. I lived in a small apartment in Brooklyn, 20-minute subway ride from the office. I made myself coffee and sat on my couch and waited. My personal phone, the one Brightline didn't have the number for, sat on the table in front of me, silent. I estimated it would take about 4 hours. That's how long before someone would notice something was wrong. Most of the Nexus operations ran automatically. Data syncing, report generation, transaction processing. It all happened in the background. People wouldn't notice it had stopped until they tried to do something that required real-time data. I was wrong about the timing. It took 2 hours. At 5:20 p.m., My phone buzzed with a LinkedIn message. It was from Devin, one of the senior developers I'd worked with. Hey, Mara, weird question, but the client portal is showing stale data, like nothing's updated since this afternoon. You know anything about that? I didn't respond. 10 minutes later, another message, this time from Rachel in logistics. Mara, I know you just left, but our shipping updates aren't coming through. The dashboard is frozen. Did something break? I turned my phone face down and sipped my coffee. By 6 p.m., according to Devin's increasingly frantic LinkedIn messages, the operations floor was in full panic mode. The client portal was down. Logistics couldn't track shipments. Sales couldn't access customer histories. The accounting system couldn't pull transaction data. International operations was completely blind. Nothing was updating. Nothing was syncing. And nobody knew how to fix it. Because the one person who understood the nexus was sitting in her apartment in Brooklyn, watching the sun set over the city. The next morning, Friday, I woke up to 37 missed calls. Not to my personal phone, to my old work cell, which I'd left on my kitchen counter. I'd forgotten to hand it in with my badge and laptop. Technically, I was supposed to return all company property, but I'd forgotten, accidentally. The voicemails were a progression of emotion. The first few were confused, asking if I knew why the integration systems weren't responding. Then they got urgent. Barrett's voice, trying to sound calm, but with an edge of panic. Mara, we need you to call back immediately. There's a critical system issue. Then they got desperate. Marcus Radley himself, the CEO who'd sat silently while Barrett humiliated me. Mara, please, we need your help, whatever it takes. I deleted them all, made myself breakfast, checked the news. It was Saturday before I checked LinkedIn. Barrett had posted something, dealing with unexpected technical challenges this week. Grateful for our amazing team pulling together to solve problems. That's what operational excellence looks like. The comments under his post were telling. Clients complaining about delayed updates. Employees commenting with crying, laughing emojis. One person just wrote, "Yeah, about that." I learned later what those 48 hours without me looked like from the inside. Devin told me everything. Weeks later over drinks, Friday morning, Barrett called an emergency meeting with the entire IT department. 8 people crammed into a conference room, all of them looking exhausted. I need the integration systems back online immediately, Barrett announced. What's the status? The IT director, a guy named Paul, who'd been with the company for 4 years, just stared at him. We can't access the core systems. They're locked down. So unlock them, Barrett snapped. We can't. The authentication is tied to Mara's credentials. When HR deactivated her account yesterday, it triggered a lockdown protocol. Then bypass it, Barrett said, like it was obvious. Paul looked at him the way you'd look at someone who just suggested you bypass gravity. The system is designed to prevent unauthorized access. We can't bypass it without the root admin credentials. Who has those credentials? Barrett demanded. Mara, Paul said quietly. She was the root admin. The room went silent. There has to be documentation, Barrett insisted. Procedures, passwords, something. Paul pulled up the shared repository on the conference room screen. There was documentation, lots of it, but it was all surface level. How to monitor the dashboards, how to restart services, how to check logs. Nothing about the core architecture. Nothing about emergency recovery. Nothing about root admin access. Because I'd never written it down. Call her, Barrett ordered. Get her back here. That's when the voicemail started. By Friday afternoon, 3 major clients had called to complain about data delays. One of them, a logistics company that processed 4 million in shipments through our platform annually, threatened to cancel their contract. By Friday evening, the stock price had dropped 3%. Not a catastrophic fall, but enough to get the board's attention. Barrett spent the weekend in the office with the IT team, trying to reverse engineer my systems. They failed, not because they weren't smart, but because you can't understand 7 years of custom solutions in 48 hours. By Monday morning, the situation had escalated from technical problem to corporate crisis. The integration systems had been down for 3 full days. Client complaints were flooding in. The sales team couldn't close deals because they couldn't access customer data. Logistics had resorted to manual tracking on spreadsheets. International operations was using email to coordinate with overseas offices. It was like the company had time traveled back to 2005. The board of directors called an emergency meeting for Monday afternoon. Barrett walked into that meeting thinking he could spin it as a temporary setback. He was wrong. I learned about the meeting from a news article that went up Tuesday morning. Brightline Technologies faces operational crisis following personnel changes. The article was brutal. It quoted anonymous employees describing the chaos. It mentioned the 3% stock drop. It noted that the company's chief technology officer had declined to comment. What the article didn't mention was that during that board meeting, one of the directors asked a simple question. Who made the decision to terminate Mara Finch? Barrett raised his hand, confident. I did, as part of operational restructuring. Were you aware she was the sole administrator of critical systems? The director asked. Barrett's confidence faltered. I was told we were moving to a new platform that would eliminate the need for her position. By whom? The vendor, Salesforce Enterprise. Another director, a woman named Patricia, who'd been on the board for 8 years, leaned forward. Did you verify that claim with our internal IT team before making the termination decision? Barrett's silence was his answer. Patricia looked at Marcus Radley. Marcus, were you aware of this situation before approving the termination? Radley shifted uncomfortably. Lachlan assured me he'd done due diligence. That's not what I asked, Patricia said coldly. The room went quiet. After a long pause, Patricia stood up. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to fix this crisis. And then we're going to have a very serious conversation about oversight and decision-making processes. She looked at Barrett. Get Mara Finch back here. Whatever it costs. That's when my personal phone finally rang. Tuesday afternoon. Unknown number. I answered. Miss Finch. This is Patricia Chen from Brightline's board of directors. Her voice was professional, measured. I'm calling to discuss your recent departure and what we can do to make this right. I'm listening, I said. We need your help to restore our systems. I'm authorized to offer you a consulting contract at 3 times your previous salary, plus a bonus upon successful restoration, 3 times my salary. That was substantial, but it wasn't enough. I appreciate the offer, I said calmly, but I need more than money. What do you need? Patricia asked. First, a formal apology from Barrett for his statements about my contributions being minimal. Public apology, sent to all staff. Done, she said immediately. Second, a seat on the technical advisory board with actual decision-making authority on IT matters. Agreed, she said. Third, a written guarantee that any future restructuring of the technology division requires board approval and technical assessment from the advisory board. There was a pause. I could hear muffled conversation in the background. Agreed, Patricia said finally. Fourth, I continued. Barrett is removed from any authority over technical operations. Another pause. Longer this time. Miss Finch, I can't make that promise without board discussion. Then have the discussion, I said, because those are my terms. I'll restore your systems and help you transition to whatever new platform you want. But I won't do it with Barrett undermining every decision. I'll call you back, Patricia said. She called back 90 minutes later. Lachlan Barrett is being reassigned to business development. He will have no authority over technical operations or personnel decisions. When do you want me to start? I asked. Can you be here tomorrow morning? I'll be there at 9 a.m. I said. Thank you. Miss Finch. Call me Mara, I replied. I walked into Brightline's office Wednesday morning through the same glass doors I'd left through 5 days earlier. Jenny at the reception desk looked up, and her face broke into a huge smile. Mara, you're back. Temporarily, I said, but the way she lit up made me think maybe longer than that. The elevator ride to the 22nd floor felt different this time. I wasn't walking into an execution. I was walking into a negotiation I'd already won. Patricia Chen met me in the lobby. She was in her 60s, silver hair cut short, wearing a navy blazer that meant business. Thank you for coming, she said, shaking my hand firmly. We went directly to the main conference room, the same room where Barrett had fired me 6 days ago. The IT team was there. Paul, Devin, Rachel from logistics, 2 other senior developers. They all looked exhausted. Dark circles, rumpled clothes, the haunted expression of people who'd spent days trying to fix something they didn't understand. They looked at me like I was a returning hero. Tell me the current status, I said, sitting down at the head of the table. The head of the table, not the execution chair. Paul pulled up diagnostics on the screen. Nexus has been in lockdown mode since Friday afternoon. All integration services suspended. We've been running manual workarounds, but we're losing data integrity by the hour. Client impact, I asked. 42 formal complaints, 2 contract cancellation threats. International operations is completely manual. I nodded, pulling out my laptop, my personal laptop, not the company one they'd confiscated. Okay, first, I need root access restored to the Nexus. Paul, I'm going to walk you through the authentication reset procedure. For the next 6 hours, I brought the systems back online, step by step, module by module. It wasn't quick. It couldn't be quick. Systems that had been locked down for 5 days needed careful resurrection. You couldn't just flip a switch and hope everything worked. But by 5 p.m., the Nexus was processing transactions again. Client portals were updating. Logistics could track shipments. Sales had their customer histories back. International operations could coordinate in real time. The relief in the room was palpable. Paul actually hugged me. I didn't think we could fix this, he admitted. It was broken by design, I replied. It was supposed to lock down when compromised. It did exactly what it was programmed to do. Patricia Chen came down to the IT floor at 6 p.m. Miss Finch, the board would like to meet with you tomorrow morning. What time? I asked. 8 a.m. And please, bring whatever proposals you have for preventing this kind of situation in the future. I spent that night writing up everything I should have documented 7 years ago. System architecture diagrams, recovery procedures, admin credential management, succession planning for critical roles, all the things I'd been too busy to do before. The board meeting Thursday morning was fascinating. 12 directors sitting around an enormous table. Patricia Chen at the head. Marcus Radley, looking diminished somehow, sitting off to one side. Barrett wasn't there. I presented my documentation and my recommendations. Formal system documentation requirements, multiple admin credentials for critical systems, regular knowledge transfer sessions, technical review requirements, before any personnel changes affecting IT infrastructure. The board listened, asked intelligent questions, approved everything. Then Patricia said something I wasn't expecting. "Miss Finch, the board has discussed your situation extensively. We'd like to offer you a permanent position as Chief Operations Officer." I blinked. Q. That was C-suite. That was Barrett's equivalent role. The position comes with full authority over technology operations, a seat on the executive team, and a substantial salary increase. She slid a folder across the table. I opened it. The number on the contract made my eyes water. $320,000 per year, plus equity, plus performance bonuses. It was more than triple my previous salary. "We need someone who understands how this company actually runs," Patricia continued. "Not someone who thinks they can manage it from a PowerPoint deck." I looked at Marcus Radley. He met my eyes and nodded slightly. "I should have stopped it," he said quietly. "I should have questioned Barrett's decision. I didn't. That was my failure. And I apologize." It wasn't enough. An apology doesn't undo humiliation, but it was something. "I'll need to think about it," I said. "Of course," Patricia replied. "Take the time you need." I went back to my old desk on the 14th floor. Except it wasn't my old desk anymore. They'd moved me to the 22nd floor while I was meeting with the board. Corner office with windows overlooking the city. The office that had been Barrett's. Devin found me there an hour later. "So the rumor mill says you're the new COO?" "Maybe," I said. "Where's Barrett?" "Business development office on the 7th floor. No windows. I heard he's handling vendor relations now." I couldn't help but smile. Barrett had gone from VP with a corner office to a middle management role in a basement office. Without windows, the poetic justice was almost too perfect. "Are you going to take it?" Devin asked. "The COO job." I looked around the office. 7 days ago, I'd been fired from this building, called minimal, humiliated in front of my colleagues. Now I was sitting in the office of the man who'd fired me, being offered his job at triple the salary. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." I called Patricia that afternoon and accepted. The announcement went out company-wide Friday morning. Brightline Technologies is pleased to announce the appointment of Mara Finch as Chief Operations Officer, effective immediately. Ms. Finch brings 7 years of institutional knowledge and technical expertise to the role. She will be responsible for all technology operations and will serve on the executive leadership team. My inbox exploded with congratulations from colleagues. Jenny from reception sent me a gif of someone doing a victory dance. Even people from other departments I'd barely worked with reached out. But the message I remember most came from Rachel in logistics. "You deserved this 7 years ago. Better late than never. Let's grab coffee and you can tell me how you pulled this off." I never got that coffee with Rachel. Things got busy too quickly. Turns out running operations for a $50 million company is complicated. But 3 weeks after I became COO, I ran into Barrett in the lobby. He was carrying a box of materials for a vendor presentation. I was heading to a board meeting. He saw me, and his face went carefully neutral. "Mara," he said stiffly. "Lachlan," I replied. We stood there for a moment in awkward silence. Finally, he spoke. "I underestimated you." It wasn't an apology. but it was an admission. "Yes," I said simply. "You did." Then I walked past him to the elevator. I didn't look back, because looking back would have given him importance he no longer deserved. My first 6 months as COO were intense. I restructured the entire technology division, implemented proper documentation requirements, established knowledge-sharing protocols so no single person could ever become as critical as I'd been, created redundancy and succession planning for every key role. I also fired 3 people, not because they were redundant, but because they were incompetent and had been coasting on other people's work for years. Barrett tried to undermine me twice in those first months. Both times involved him making statements in meetings that contradicted my technical decisions. Both times, I shut him down with data and documentation. The second time, Patricia Chen pulled him aside after the meeting. I don't know what she said, but he never tried again. By month 7, the company's operations were running better than they ever had. We'd recovered all the clients who'd threatened to leave during the crisis. The stock price had bounced back and then climbed another 8%. The board approved my proposal for a new unified platform, but with proper technical oversight this time. The implementation took 18 months and went perfectly, because we did it right, with documentation, with training, with redundancy built in from the beginning. Barrett left the company month 14 of my tenure. He got recruited by some startup in Austin. I found out from a LinkedIn post where he talked about his exciting new role. He didn't mention Brightline in his post. Not once. 2 years after becoming COO. I was sitting in my office, looking out at the city, when Patricia Chen stopped by. She was retired from the board by then, but she still dropped in occasionally. "I wanted to tell you something," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "After the crisis, we did an investigation into Barrett's hiring, and I asked. He came recommended by someone on the board, someone who'd worked with him at McKinsey. They pushed hard for his appointment, convinced Marcus he was exactly what we needed." "Let me guess," I said. "That board member resigned shortly after the crisis." Patricia smiled. Perceptive, as always. "Yes. He resigned, rather than face a vote of no confidence." "Did you know I was the root admin before the crisis?" I asked. "No," she admitted. "But after we reviewed everything, it became clear that our board had failed in its oversight duties. We'd let Marcus run the company without enough technical understanding at the board level." "Is that why you created the technical advisory board?" I asked. "That was your condition," she reminded me. "But yes, it was also the right thing to do. We needed technical expertise in forming strategic decisions." She stood up to leave, then paused at the door. "You know what I learned from all this, Mara. The people doing the invisible work are the ones running everything. They're just invisible until they stop." After she left, I pulled up Barrett's LinkedIn profile. His new job had lasted 8 months before the startup folded. He was currently listed as an independent consultant, which usually meant unemployed. I closed the browser and went back to work, 3 years after the crisis. Brightline acquired 2 smaller competitors and doubled in size. I led the technical integration for both acquisitions. We had the systems to handle it now, documented, robust, with multiple people trained on every critical function. I built a team of 12 people who understood the systems as well as I did. Maybe better in some areas. That was the goal. Make myself replaceable. Make sure the company could function without me. Ironically, making myself replaceable made me more valuable, because I wasn't just running systems anymore. I was building institutional knowledge. creating a technical culture that could scale and adapt 5 years after the crisis. I got a LinkedIn message from Barrett. Mara, I know this is unexpected, but I wanted to reach out. I'm working with a company that's going through a technical transition, and I remembered your expertise. Would you be open to a consulting call? Paid? Of course. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Part of me wanted to send back something snarky about minimal contributions. But mostly, I just felt tired of carrying the anger. I replied simply, "Thanks for thinking of me, but I'm not taking outside consulting work right now. Best of luck with your project." He never responded. I didn't expect him to. Some endings don't need elaborate closure. Sometimes you just move on. I'm still COO of Brightline Technologies. 7 years after the crisis. The company's worth $400 million. We employ 600 people across 8 offices. I have a team I trust, systems that work, and documentation that ensures nobody is irreplaceable, including me. I could walk away tomorrow and the company would continue. That's not because I'm not valuable. It's because I built value into the structure itself. I learned something important from that week in October when everything fell apart. Your value isn't in being irreplaceable. Your value is in building things that last, in teaching others what you know, in making the invisible work visible. Because the moment your work becomes visible, you become powerful, not the kind of power Barrett wielded, based on fear and arrogance. Real power, based on knowledge and respect. The kind of power that gets you a seat at the table. The kind of power that changes your title from Senior Systems Integration Specialist to Chief Operations Officer. The kind of power that lets you fire back with 3 little words. Good luck with the migration. Big thanks for sticking with this story. You legends of the corporate jungle. If you enjoyed watching Barrett learn the hard way, that the people who build the systems are the ones who run them, hit that subscribe button. Share this with anyone who's ever been underestimated at work. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just being so good at what you do that they can't function without you, and then making them pay triple to realize it.